Good morning, welcome. It's great we've got so many of you joining us today for our Making Sense of the Funding Landscape webinar. We hope it will be an informative and valuable session. Just to note, this session is being recorded and will be made available afterwards. By way of introductions, I'm Zoe Spilberg, Head of Education at BCS, and you'll be hearing from my colleague Annette Allmark, Head of Apprenticeships, and we're particularly delighted to be joined by Simon Ashworth, from the Association of Employment and Learning Providers. Before I run through the agenda, Annette and Simon, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Simon, I'll introduce myself briefly. So I'm Annette Allmark, Head of Apprenticeships at BCS, and I'll be talking a little bit about the digital apprenticeships at the end of this webinar. Simon.
Hi everyone, I'm Simon Ashworth. I'm the Chief Policy Officer at the Association of Employment Learning Providers. Hopefully got an action-packed deck of slides to talk about, lots of sort of change over the last few months. So looking forward to it. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. Annette, if you wouldn't mind just running through to the agenda slide. Thank you. So it's been a busy start to the year in the education space with the publication of the much anticipated FE reform white paper and the progress with the digital bootcamps, kickstart scheme, lifetime skills guarantee among them. I'm sure most of us would also have heard and read the news this morning about the Learning and Work Institute's research that points to the fact that the UK is heading towards a catastrophic digital skills shortage disaster. I'll pick up on that, as will Annette later, when we talk about what's available from BCS that addresses these issues while working within the funding incentives you'll be hearing about. We're very grateful that Simon is giving us the benefit of his time and expertise today, and he's going to outline and help to demystify and unpack the range of recently announced policy developments and funding initiatives, while also linking to relevant announcements we've heard in the recent spring budget. If you have any questions during the presentations, please post them in the question feature, and we will make sure to leave time at the end of the session to cover as many of them off as possible. Those that we don't get to will collate into an FAQ document and also get back to you individually where necessary. So without holding us up any further, thank you, Simon. Over to you to kick us off, please.
Thanks, Zoe. So before we go on to the first slide, what I'm going to run through over the next sort of half an hour or so, I'm just going to do a recap over the last few months. You know, we've had lots of announcements, the plan for jobs, the plan for skills, and then more recently the spring budget, which there was lots to unpack in there. After that, I'll have a quick run through of the main sort of flagship programs, apprenticeships, traineeships, and kickstart, and just unpick those, thinking about that from a learner, an employer, and a provider perspective. And then just want to end with the lifetime skills guarantee. So having a look at the new level 3 adult offer that's coming very imminently. Lots of opportunities in there if you've got funding for that. Demystify a little bit of that, and then end on the new technical and digital boot camps, which is another aspect of the Prime Minister's lifetime skills guarantee, which I know the Minister and the DfE are big advocates of that model. So it'd be good to look at that in a little bit more detail. So that's the plan for the next sort of half an hour. I just want to, if Annette, you could just move on to the next slide, that'd be great. Okay, so just want to recap really before we get to the spring budget. There's been lots of announcements, a lot of the investment that we've seen in response to kind of COVID, a lot of it builds on previous announcements. So it's worth just revisiting these and kind of recapping what we've got, what's coming in as a replacement, what's been successful, what probably hasn't been so successful, what's the direction of travel. So rewinding back to the summer, we had the Chancellor Rishi Sunak's plan for jobs back in the summer, July 2020, and a huge commitment around the flagship programme, the Kickstart scheme. £2 billion was set aside for that. So that was for 16 to 24-year-olds who were out of work. £2 billion, you know, that's a significant amount of funding. When you think about the apprenticeship levy separately, generates about 2.3 billion a year. So a huge part of the plan for jobs was this commitment to young people. And just taking a step back, from that, you know, the Prime Minister originally talked about an apprenticeship guarantee for young people, and that morphed into an opportunity guarantee, so giving young people something to do, whether it's a kickstart, a traineeship, an apprenticeship, or a high value extension to their study program. So that was a flagship announcement back in the summer around Kickstart, and I'll talk about Kickstart in a bit more detail a bit later in the presentation. Back in the plan for jobs, the Chancellor announced 100,000 places and £200 million of employer incentives for employers who take on a new apprentice, and these were for new hire apprentices. So these aren't for existing staff, these were for staff already employed, and they were split into two categories based on age. And originally the plan for jobs was that scheme would run from the 1st of August through until the end of January. So 100,000 places committed by the Chancellor. And a big boost around traineeships as well. Traineeships is a programme that was almost sort of fizzled out, really. You know, really valuable pre-employment programme, of which outcomes are either to get an apprenticeship, get a job, or move into further educational study. So some new investment, a move by the government to bring more providers in to deliver traineeships, triple the numbers, enhanced eligibility, so learners with a prior level 3 are able to do a traineeship, and also the announcement around £1,000 incentive payment to employers for taking on a young person and putting them on a work placement, which is the key aspect of traineeships. So I'll certainly unpack those three schemes on the next slide or so. Moving onwards, we had at the end of last year, we had the spending review. The apprenticeship incentives I talked about, they were extended slightly. So in terms of the duration, they're extended until the end of March, which is obviously coming up, fast approaching in a week's time. And what were some of the kind of key messages from the Chancellor around apprenticeships? You know, very much around an announcement to talk about around portable apprenticeships, a bulk levy around letting employers utilise more of their funding, and also looking at different delivery models around how apprenticeships could be front loaded. And there was some information in the spending review about the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which was one to keep an eye on for the next spending review. Kind of getting into more sort of present territory, as Zoe mentioned, we had the FE reform white paper. The white paper very much focuses at level 3 and above, and advanced and technical skills, which is quite important for those who operate in the digital space. You know, you look at the digital apprenticeships; they're all at level 3 and above. Probably one of the revolutionary bits around the white paper was the announcement of a lifelong loan entitlement coming in 2025, aimed really at sort of bridging the gap between level 3 and into degree space. So very much modular, flexible learning at level 4 and level 5. And again, that very well positioned around the digital space. We had the announcement around new local skills improvement plans, and also employers at the heart of FE reform. Anyone who's been involved in apprenticeships remember some of the rhetoric around employers in the driving seat. We've now got employers at the centre, which feels right. You know, we should have a system, an ecosystem with employers at the centre, supported by awarding organisations, providers, and other stakeholders. A part of the announcement was the lifetime skills guarantee, which we've got the new level 3 adult offer, and there's at least 33 IT digital qualifications within that, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail, and the digital and technical boot camps. The key messages around apprenticeships, three really. One was around the government wants to increase participation, so get more people to take an apprenticeship, support employers spend more of their apprenticeship levy, and increase the quality. So kind of three key messages there and moving forward around apprenticeships. And the move really to align more traineeships to sort of to align towards line of sight into apprenticeships. We're starting to see some pilots around construction and rail, but certainly traineeships are an important route into apprenticeships, something that many employers utilise, and certainly not necessarily just exclusive to kind of construction and rail. I know a number of providers already offer very sectoralised traineeships to feed those apprenticeship programmes. And then into the spring budget. So the spring budget was only a few weeks ago, but the big announcement in the spring budget was an extension and enhancement to the apprenticeship employer incentives, and I'll talk about those on the next slide. So we're moving to a flat rate of £3,000 for new hires. So there are kind of 5 key announcements really in the spring budget to talk through in a bit more detail. The first one was around furlough. So the furlough scheme has been extended. It is certainly thinking about apprenticeships and apprentices. There's been a relatively low number of apprentices who've fortunately been made redundant. So it's somewhere around sort of 1,200 apprentices, which is still unfortunate, but a lot fewer than has been expected, really. So the extension to the job retention scheme is certainly a helpful facet, and hopefully it will encourage more apprentices to be returned to their job from the furlough scheme. But there is a taper in there. So towards the end of the job retention scheme, the employer just have to contribute on a tapered rate in the last couple of months. But the big ticket item really in the spring budget was the announcements around the employer incentives. Going back to what I said at the start, the government set aside 100,000 of those, and they had relatively low take up. So the employers have accessed about 25,000, so only about 25%. So the employer incentives weren't necessarily getting the traction that the government wanted to create new jobs and create new apprenticeships. So the big announcement in the budget was that between the 1st of April and the end of September, there'll be a new incentive payment to replace the existing scheme. So it's a £3,000 flat rate, and that's regardless of age. So if you're an employer and you take on a new apprentice, so if you employ them and you put them on the apprenticeship programme, you'll get a £3,000 incentive instead of the £2,000 and the £1,500 for the age groups mentioned there. If you're taking on a 16 to 18 apprentice, you get another £1,000. So actually getting, for a young person, you're getting about £4,000 incentive. For a young person on the apprenticeship minimum wage on a programme, costs around £6,500 a year. So well over half potentially of equivalent of a wage subsidy. So we've seen lots of interest from this. I definitely think it's a much better enhanced scheme that will encourage more employers, and certainly smaller employers, to take on an apprenticeship, take on an apprentice as we come out of lockdown and bounce back into the summer period. In terms of the incentives themselves, if you're not aware of these schemes, the employer has to claim them themselves through the online apprenticeship service. And they're paid in 2 instalments, and that's based on the apprentice still being employed and also being on their apprenticeship programme after 90 and 365 days. But the devil's always in the detail here in terms of the actual payment employers get. There's a lag in the system. So if you employ someone from the 1st of April, you don't get paid the incentive after 90 days. After 90 days, they just become eligible. So typically, there's a lag of about a month before the employer gets that first payment. It has to correlate with the data return the provider submits with the individual learner record to prove that they're still on programme. Just to recognise that there is a scheme that's running at the moment, and it runs out at the end of March, and employers have only got until the end of April to submit a claim for any incentives in the current scheme as it is. And there was a big announcement last week that the government is resetting the cap for non-levy paying employers. So non-levy paying employers have to recruit an apprentice through the apprenticeship service, the online system. And they have been capped at 10 from the 1st of April. That cap will be reset, so they'll be able to recruit up to another 10 apprentices, either existing staff or new hires. So that was a positive move, and that'll be a good thing for SMEs, and will help with the increase in demand that we're likely to see with the enhanced apprenticeship incentives. Onto traineeships. The traineeships got a £126 million boost in the spring budget. The government's got some really ambitious targets around the numbers of trainees undertaking traineeships. This is a programme that's personally backed by the Chancellor. He's a big fan of traineeships, not necessarily just for bouncing back from COVID, but also an important programme in the long term. The current contracts that have just been let for a 2.5-year period. Key point here is that the £1,000 employer incentive for work placements is being extended until next summer, so July 2022. There is a cap on those, so employers are able to access 10 employer incentives per region, and the SFA splits the country into, or splits England into 9 geographic regions. So large employers depending on where these placements are taking place, could potentially access up to 90 of these work placement capacity building grants to support with that. A slightly different arrangement for employers claiming those grants. Those requests are made through an online portal on gov.uk. There's a link there, which you'll be able to see in the slides later. So it's not through the apprenticeship service for those incentive grants. And then a couple of other announcements in the spring budget. One's about portable apprenticeships, and the other is around the Help to Grow scheme. And I'll just talk about the portable apprenticeships first. So the portable apprenticeships, again, this was first mooted by the Chancellor in the spending review. There's a lot of sectors where apprentices have project-based work, the creative sector. To some extent, you might see that in digital as well, where people are doing projects to build a website for an organisation. So, challenges around the duration of apprenticeships being at least 12 months with 20% off the job training. So the whole idea really is portable apprenticeships is to enable those individuals to stack those projects and tasks together to push them over the minimum duration. So we've already got a scheme that's available called Apprenticeship Training Agencies, which have been around since 2009. Apprenticeship training agencies don't actually do any training. They're actually a recruitment vehicle for apprentices who are then hired out to businesses. So portable apprentices, we're going to see a bit of capital investment into those. There's a consultation coming in April. There's a prospectus for 7 million of pump priming coming in the summer, with those programs starting in early next year. And then just onto the other announcement from the spring budget was around the Help to Grow scheme. Two strands for this. One's around digital and one's around management support. The management support is a 90% government funded scheme. Employers have to contribute £750 to that. It's a scheme that's open for expressions of interest, and you can register for that. The key aspects of that scheme is about helping employers, small employers, so less than 250 employees, create marketing and financial strategic plans, develop growth plans, improve resilience, inspire employer engagement, but also about adopting digital technology. So there's grants available for up to 30,000 SMEs. And again, you can put in a register of interest for that now, but it doesn't start until later this year. And then the second strand of the Help to Grow scheme is around digital. And this is going to be an online digital platform from the government around supporting employers, around free advice around technology, and a 50% funded voucher up to £5,000 for employers who are looking to implement productivity enhancing software. So timeline for that, just so you're aware, is more information of that on that scheme specifically is coming in the summer, with the scheme due to open in the autumn. So one to watch out. So that was announced in the budget as well. So if we just move on to the next slide, please, Annette, that's great. So just a bit about the flagship schemes, thinking about which schemes are right for you, from a learner, from an employer, from a provider perspective. A shed load of money has been poured into this, as I talked about before, Kickstart, 2 billion, apprenticeships, several hundred million, and just on the incentives on apprenticeships alone, another couple of hundred million. So nearly 2.5 billion to support these programs. It's one of the criticisms that we hear a lot is you've got lots of different schemes, but they kind of lack coherence and consistency, and they kind of cut across each other. So you can see what the government's tried to do with the Kickstart scheme, with traineeships and apprenticeships. They very much created these schemes in isolation, very much from a learner perspective. So you look there that the Kickstart scheme is supposed to be for young people who are furthest from the job market. A traineeship is a young person who has got some skills, but they lack work experience. And for apprenticeships, they're for all ages really, who are ready to take that leap. So the government has really sort of siloed young people and put them into a pot really. But that's not necessarily the way that employers, employer behaviour, employers think about, who they're going to bring into their business, what incentives are available, what are the progression routes, can they try before they buy. So they do appear very much in isolation and competition with each other. So just to kind of run through these, The Kickstart scheme is aimed supposedly at the young people who are furthest from the labour market. The young people, so 16 to 24, they must be on universal credit to be on the Kickstart scheme. So that does alienate a lot of 16, 17-year-olds who aren't on UC. In essence, the Kickstart scheme is a 6-month funded work placement where the young person is paid the national minimum wage. The employer pays that and they get that back from the government, so it doesn't cost them anything. Probably one of the big changes around Kickstart is the relaxation on the cap of 30. So smaller employers who wanted to take a Kickstart would have had to use a gateway or an intermediary to club together to put in a proposal to the government rather than applying directly. But the government have now removed that cap of 30. So if you are a small employer, you don't have to be in part of a gateway's offer. You can go direct to the job centre and ask for a young person for a work placement. So that's quite a big change. Alongside the subsidy for the wages, there's also £1,200 that's available to the employer, and that's to help with administrative support. And the only training requirement around Kickstart is some basic employability skills. So it's probably one of the big disappointments, I guess, from Kickstart is, a funded work placement with no real training as a requirement for young people. Just on the training though for Kickstart, certainly for the older Kickstarters who are over the age of 19, depending on their prior attainments they might be eligible for funded qualifications through the adult education budget. So things like your maths, your English, your digital skills, they're obviously entitlements. Depending on their age, they might not have a prior level 2 qualification. And if they're 19 to 23, they might have a prior level 3. So qualifications can be added on by the employer and the provider if they can find funding through the AEB. So that's the Kickstart scheme. I think there's only been about 4,500 starts on Kickstart, which is relatively low. There's lots of figures floating around. There's been lots of interest from employers. I think there's been over 100,000 applications to take a Kickstarter, but the numbers on Kickstart are technically very low. And the scheme is due to come to an end at the end of this year, but we might see an extension. We should wait and see. In terms of traineeships, as I was saying, they're very much aimed at young people who are job ready but lack a work placement. So this is a work placement program wrapped with maths, English, digital skills, and some other vocational qualifications. But it's not supposed to be an academic vocational program with work experience. That's what a study program is. So as I said before, traineeships, they're a flexible pre-employment program. They're not solely a pre-apprenticeship. They've got the outcomes on traineeships are to get a job, get an apprenticeship, or go into further education or study. I talked before about the changes, prior attainment that changed in September. So learners who've now got a level 3 qualification are eligible to do a traineeship. So for 19 plus trainees, digital skills is now a requirement. It came in as part of the framework change in September. So I think the government talked very much around digital skills. They pretty much meant essential digital skills, but back in September, there weren't many AOs who offered the essential digital skills, but there's a number who do. I know BCS offer that as well. And the 19 plus, obviously, it's a legal entitlement as part of the AEB. In terms of the programme, it's a minimum of 6 weeks. It's now been extended up to 12 months. It's very unlikely you'll see many trainees on a 12-month traineeship. It's supposed to be about short, sharp intervention into employment or into further academic routeways. So like I say, it's about the work placement with maths, English, digital skills. Some vocational qualifications can be included to add value, but it's not supposed to be a vocationally driven programme. The employer grants, like I said, there's £1,000 that's available, and I talked about those before, and that's been extended until July next year. And apprenticeships, I'm sure everyone's well versed on apprenticeships. Anyone over the age of 16 can do an apprenticeship. Very competitive market for young people. We've seen a big decline in under 24s undertaking apprenticeships, even pre-COVID, and that's continued. The minimum wage for apprenticeships announced in the budget is increasing to £4.30 from April. But the apprenticeships are a long-term commitment. It's the best option for the learner. It's a guaranteed job that lasts at least 12 months. Over 95% of apprentices continue with that. So there's a bigger commitment with the employer in terms of the employment and the offer of the job, But hopefully the new hire incentives will encourage a lot more employers, certainly SMEs, to be able to take that step and take on an apprentice. That's great. If we just move on to the next slide. So I just want to talk about the big announcement from the Prime Minister back in September, was the announcement around the new lifetime skills guarantee. And the lifetime skills guarantee has got two facets. One is the level 3 adult offer, which I'll talk about first, and then I'll talk about the digital and technical bootcamps, which I've got a slide on before I finish. So the level 3 adult offer is a new scheme. It's coming in from the 1st of April, so it's only a week away from that scheme launching. It's actually being funded through the National Skills Fund. So the National Skills Fund, a big Conservative Party manifesto commitment to put some more funding to support adults. So the adult education budget has reduced by about 50% over the last 10 years. So adult education has been sort of bottom of the priority list from the government around, you look at apprenticeships, young people, adult education has suffered. So this is a significant boost. When you take out the funding for the devolved countries, so purely for England, you're looking at about 400 million a year as part of the National Skills Fund to support boot camps, the level 3 adult offer, and some other things I suspect that in the melting pot to watch out for. So what the lifetime skills guarantee is, it's a new entitlement for adults over 24 who don't have a prior level 3 qualification, who otherwise would have had to take out an advanced learner loan. So it's important to recognise if the adult has got a prior level 3, so for example 2 or more A levels, then they're ineligible for this scheme. So this is so it's not a scheme for reskilling. It is very much a scheme for upskilling adults who haven't had a prior level 3 or equivalent qualification. How this has been described is a dynamic catalogue of qualifications. So at the last check, there's 387 qualifications in this level 3 catalogue, and they're a range of qualifications. They're vocationally related qualifications. There's some occupational qualifications, A levels, AS. The majority of vocational qualifications, just under 50%, are vocationally related. I was having a look at this the other day. There's, at the moment, as I say, it's dynamic. There's 33, which certainly be interested to those in the digital IT space, along with other programs such as leadership management, accountancy, etc. But certainly 33 are classified as ICT for users or ICT practitioners. And I've just picked out some examples there. These are some good technical chunky qualifications: certificates, diploma size, diploma in software development, systems infrastructure, certificate in coding, and I know BCS have a number of those approved as well. So some really good qualifications in there, and some of those are quite chunky as well. However, it is a complex funding landscape about getting the right funding to be able to offer these programs in the short term, and it's never as easy as it could be, is it? So if you're a training provider, if you're an independent training provider, you might have an ESFA procured adult education budget that runs out in July. And if that's the case, you've only got a very short 4-month window to fully deliver a full level 3. So very difficult to deliver a level 3 diploma in 4 months. There is absolutely no carryover for that. Unfortunately, that's because the AEB contracts, which they're sort of piggybacking off the back of, do come to a hard close in July. So at the moment, the ESFA are procuring the new adult education non-devolved contracts. I think the deadline for the tenders was 10 o'clock this morning, of which the level 3 adult offer from August onwards is included and ring-fenced within those. So I know a lot of providers are looking, certainly from the August onwards period, around the level 3 adult offer. If you're a grant-funded provider, so if you're a college or a local authority, you've got a lot more flexibility here. So you can start delivering the level 3 adult offer from the 1st of April, and you don't have to have the intricacies of the contracts coming to an end in July. You'll be able to carry learners into the next academic year. And then the other added complexities here is obviously the AEB is 50% devolved to the mayoral combined authorities. So the rules around eligibility and the qualifications and the funding rates are exactly the same in devolved and non-devolved areas, but the mayoral combined authorities have control about who gets the funding, so which providers. Some will just include it into existing allocations, some will procure that. So it is an absolute, it is quite a complex space, the adult funding landscape, and we expect to see some changes moving forward around simplifying AEB and the adult space, and that was a theme from the white paper. So depending on which provider you are, what you're looking to deliver, it is quite complex, and the challenges for employers as well. If you want a national offer, this is a national scheme, but it's different pots of funding for it. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges. And then just in terms of the funding for this, so there is a premium for offering the level 3 adult offer. So it is quite a restrictive catalogue based on high skill needs and priority sectors, but in essence, it uses the core AEB funding methodology. So for people who aren't aware of that, each qualification is allocated a base rate. You can find that on the LARS, the Learner Aims Reference Service from the ESFA. All qualifications are giving a programme weighting, which is a factor which ranges from 1 to 1.7. So depending on the sector, they might get an uplift. I think IT generally tends to be does have a premium. And then depending on where the learner lives, there might be a disadvantage uplift as well. And then if you deliver it in a high cost area like London and the South East, there's another uplift which you have to factor in, and that gives you a qualification rate for AEB. So all you do with the level 3 adult offer is, depending on the size of the qualification, so pretty much saying that if it's got more than 360 guided learning hours, it gets a £600 code 45 uplift, or if it's a slightly smaller qualification, it gets a £150 uplift. Those uplifts are subject to the same disadvantage and area uplifts where you're delivering, and then you just add that to the base rate. So you might get an increase of around 15 to 20% on the rates you would normally deliver for a 19 to 23-year-old adult on the adult education budget. So that's the level 3 adult offer, and my final slide is on technical and digital boot camps. So yeah, the second strand of the Prime Minister's Lifetime Skills Guarantee is the boot camp model. So these are aimed at reskilling and retraining, as opposed to bringing in adults who haven't got a prior level 3. So just talk about the funding values available. So the level 3 adult offer I've just talked about, there's around 95 million of the National Skills Fund that's been carved off for that. For the boot camps, an initial 43 million went out to procurement earlier this year. That procurement is now closed, and we're waiting the results for that. I think the DfE said they had over 400 expressions of interest in these schemes. So the DfE have been very kind of clear to us around the bootcamp model. It's a model they really like. They are, if it's successful, they're looking to expand it out in further sort of sectors and areas. The digital bootcamp actually builds on a couple of pilots that ran last year. There was one in the West Midlands Combined Authority, and I think there was another one in the Northwest. So this isn't, this is a relatively tried and tested model. But one of the key points around the digital and tech boot camps is to stress to people, I have to stress this a lot, that these are technical programs. These aren't, they're looking at skills gaps around things like coding, software development, cyber. These aren't soft IT skills. These are upskilling individuals to do technical jobs. I mean, the best way of kind of describing these programs is probably a bit like a hybrid of a sector-based work academy, but slightly longer and much more technical. So it's about trying to create new jobs, fill jobs where there's a skill need. So very much linked to employers. These programs are open to adults over the age of 19, and the adults can be employed or unemployed. There's a big drive from the government to try and get women returners, more women into tech, moving people into occupation. So there's no specific rules on prior attainment, so not like the level 3 adult offer. So if you've got a degree in accountancy and you want to become a software developer, that you can undertake these programs. But Probably the biggest challenge is that for individuals who are employed, there's a mandatory employer cash contribution of 30%. If they're unemployed, they're fully funded. And there's also a very challenging target of 70% into jobs, or into progression into jobs, or into, if they're already employed, into those skilled roles. So certainly I know some parts of the sector are a little bit concerned about how this programme knits together in terms of employer contributions for employed learners, and also, you know, a very high job outcome rate. But if it's employer-led, you know, it's delivering those high-value technical skills where there's skill shortages, you can see why it's been how it's been designed that way. And then just kind of finish on the boot camps. You know, they are out of scope of Ofsted, and there is a very different funding model. Certainly, if you're a provider looking to deliver these, it's not like your standard funding methodology. The DFE pay a lump sum on start, quite a considerable amount on completing the learning, and then another payment based on getting a job, or staying in a job, or progressing into another highly skilled role. So very different methodology. This is a DFE designed program as opposed to an ESFA design program. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into the digital and technical boot camps. And I think that's my slides done.
Thank you very much, Simon. I think the way you've unpacked the detail there has been really, really helpful. There are quite a few questions coming through into the question box, and we will leave enough time to tackle those all at the end. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of two of our qualifications that are eligible for some of these initiatives that we've just heard Simon talking about. To start with the BCS Essential Digital Skills qualifications that, as we've heard, can be used as part of a traineeship, potentially also kickstarts. So all of us on this call will be acutely aware of the situation we're facing in the UK with lack of basic digital skills. Data gathered from before the pandemic told us that nearly a quarter of the population lacked the full basic range of digital skills. And we've heard just today in the news, latest research tells us that the mismatch between the rising demand for digital skills and the supply of sufficiently trained recruits is costing the economy billions of pounds, as well as increasing the inequalities that already existed pre-COVID for those lacking in digital skills and their access to employment opportunities, services and goods. So clearly, essential digital skills are even more relevant and more of a priority for development than ever. And in order to best support the UK's economic recovery from COVID and to fast track as many people as possible into new employment opportunities, BCS have focused our initial qualifications on the workplace with our two essential digital skills for work qualifications. As you'll be aware, they're aimed at the two levels. If you wouldn't mind, actually no, we can keep on this slide, Annette, sorry. They're aimed at the two levels: entry level for adults with no or little prior experience of using digital devices or the internet, and level 1 for those with some experience but lacking those secure basic digital skills. The qualifications are mapped to the national standards for basic digital literacy and cover those 5 skill areas: using devices and handling information to gather a basic understanding of hardware, software, operating systems and commonly used applications, creating and editing documents and digital media, gathering an understanding of digital communications and using them in a range of contexts. The transaction areas around the ability to fill in online forms, comply with digital verification checks, purchase goods, services online. And that final area is about understanding the importance of digital well-being and how to be responsible online, including privacy and data protection and the impact of your online activities. Next slide, please, Annette. Thank you. So to support the teaching provision, we at BCS have created provider toolkits, and these have been specifically developed to be flexible and adaptable to suit your delivery model. Centres and learners will have access to a range of both online and offline teaching tools to complement and enhance your centre's programme. A learner's EDSQ journey will fully explore all 5 area modules, steadily building ability and confidence in everyday digital skills. Our suggested learner journey there delivers each of the modules in a logical order, along with suggested individual and group activities to support the planning, teaching and learning experiences. The scheme of learning has been designed to work with the natural flow of the EDSQ for work pathway and to allow learners to progress through the skills areas in an order that builds workplace readiness and helps them understand and explore the relationships between the modules. Naturally, of course, as each learner's journey is unique to the individual, there is flexibility to reorder or overlap modules as required. Next slide, please, Annette. Thank you. So when the learners are ready to sit their on-demand online tests, there are 2 assessments, a knowledge test comprising 30 questions and a skills test with in-app and simulated tasks across 4 different scenarios. There's a broad mix of question types from hotspots, multiple choice, matching questions, and of course in-app questions to test a learner's ability to create and edit documents. There's a link on our website to our EDSQ specific webinar we held last month, and you'll find all the detail you should need about all aspects of the qualifications in there, and include a link to that webinar on our communications after this. We also mentioned the National Skills Fund, which aims to help adults to train and gain the skills they need to improve their job prospects and in turn support the economy. Next slide, please, Annette. As Simon said, from next month, well, next week, really, any adult aged 24 and over who wants to achieve their first full level 3 will be able to access the BCS level 3 certificate in IT user skills, known as ECDL Advanced. This adult offer is about removing those age constraints and financial barriers for adults looking for that first full level 3. So they can progress. And again, today's report tells us that 60% of UK businesses believe their reliance on advanced digital skills is set to increase exponentially over the next 5 years. And 3/4 of them believe that the lack of digital skills is going to hit their profitability. Our internationally recognised ECDL qualifications provide full coverage of all the main Microsoft Office applications, which provide that employability focus. In fact, ECDL is often referenced in job adverts and is known to be highly respected by employers. Next slide, please, Annette. Thank you. This level 3 qualification has 3 mandatory units as shown here, and assessment takes place through the completion of unit tests. BCS offers on-demand automated testing with instant results, no requirement for tutors to mark the tests. And this provides automated certification on completion with no moderation delays. We also offer the option of diagnostic tests to help check whether a learner is test ready and to feedback on areas for development. We'll make courseware ebooks available to support your delivery as well. I think last slide for me, Annette. I'm aware I'm racing through because I know you've got lots yet to cover and want to get to the questions. So Simon went through in super detail the funding for this be routed through the mayoral combined authorities and Greater London Authority for residents in those areas, and for areas outside of England it would be routed through AEB and administered by the ESFA. These links obviously will be shared with you afterwards. Simon talked about the uplift for each qualification in this offer, and as they're linked to the guided learning hours, and ours has a GLH of 179, it's eligible for that £150 per qualification uplift. I believe there are arrangements in place to allow ESFA funded providers to over-deliver on their level 3 allocation by up to 50% between April and July this year. Simon might be able to clarify that when we get to our Q&A afterwards. I think that's it from me, and I'll hand over to Annette. Thank you, to talk about what's coming up in the apprenticeship world.
Thanks, Zoe, for that. I won't take too long because I know that everyone will want to get to the questions and have some time to ask further points or bits to clarify with Simon. But just to pick up on what Zoe was saying just now, you know, today we have heard in the news the urgent need for digital skills. And I don't think that's really a huge surprise for us, because we know that there is a increasing need, especially with the result of the pandemic and many companies having to transform their digital skills and capabilities very quickly. So we've summarised here some of the main points, just in case you haven't seen this in the news today, and also put a link to the report itself, so you can go straight to that and have a read, which I'm sure we will all be doing. In terms of this for apprenticeships, I think it's very clear in terms of what's coming out, though, the huge opportunities of what Simon's just put across so well in terms of those government incentives and the potential to invest into workplace skills via apprenticeships. And we can see sort of definite areas we know at BCS in terms of our research, but areas like AI and cloud and robotics, data, incredibly important. But in terms of investing into those skills, this is a really sort of important time and very timely in the fact that these are coming out now, as there are a number of new and revised digital apprenticeships. So we already have a number of digital apprenticeships out, but we have some new areas and we've listed them here. There's links to all of these on our website, and I've put those links at the bottom of the slide so you can go to those and have a look. But we've got some exciting new areas like DevOps and level 3 cybersecurity technician, data technician also has recently been released, and we've got AI. And all of the existing digital apprenticeships have had a refresh recently, and they're literally any minute due to be relaunched, and they're listed below. So data analysts, business analysts, software development, all the apprenticeships in the second list, they're available, but as I said, being refreshed, and they will be live soon as well. So we have information on our website, as I've said. Also, we have a short introduction to apprenticeships, which may be useful for employers who haven't been so involved in digital apprenticeships, and also for training providers and people working with employers. And we'll send you a link to this afterwards, but it gives you an outline of some of the real basics, and actually sometimes it's really useful to go back to basics and understand sort of what apprenticeships are, how they will help, the way to go about them in terms of plotting your own apprenticeship journey. And our role, we're an endpoint assessment organisation, as many of you will be aware of. We've had a lot of experience assessing over 10,000 digital apprenticeships. Really excited about what's out there now in terms of the new digital apprenticeships and sort of the many different occupations they cover. So there's some good advice and guidance and tips in there, and as I said, we will share that with you so that you can read that and get further information if you need from our website. And what we've just put on here as well and included is a link to the BCS web resource around the government incentives, and we try and make sure that's kept up to date with all the relevant information in one point. So we've got some good summaries and all of the various great things that go out, and there is a huge amount of information available, but sometimes it's quite difficult to tap into all of it. So what we're trying to do is just bring it into one place. So if you're looking at apprenticeships or any of the other areas around the plan for jobs, or looking at the skills incentives, you can find them there. So I'm not going to go on too much more, because I know the key thing to anything like this is actually having your questions asked. So I know, Zoe, you're looking at those at the moment. So Simon, can I ask you to come back? Thank you. And Zoe, what questions have we had in so far?
Thank you. So I'm going to launch straight in so we get through as many as possible live, and then we'll pick them up afterwards. Does the Kickstart scheme include young people wanting to start up their own businesses?
It's not really what Kickstart's aimed at. It's about placing a young person with an existing employer. So they might, based on that experience, go off and set up their own business. But a young person couldn't set up a business through the Kickstart scheme as a main route, but it might be an outcome, I guess, of going through the scheme. Yeah,
perfectly clear. Thank you. Then we had a question. Do you think the low apprenticeship take-up is down to the fact that furlough has been extended, delaying the inevitable?
I wouldn't necessarily say that that'd be the case. I think, there's a real challenge with apprentices already on programme and making slow progress and being delayed because of the furlough and remote learning. But I just think it's the uncertainty for employers. in the first lockdown, there was the numbers of apprentices who were existing employees wasn't as badly impacted as new recruits. You know, certainly sort of the youngest people tend to be recruited into an organisation rather than being an existing employee. So I think it's more about the uncertainty, the lockdown, obviously the commitment to take somebody. I mean, I think someone else has made a comment here that obviously under 25s also are entitled to the national insurance benefit as well for the employer. So, you know, when you add that to the £3,000 and the £1,000 for a 16 to 18, you know, hopefully that will give employers more confidence that you know, that there's an equivalent to a wage subsidy to help them commit to you know, bringing staff in. So I'd be more worried that that'd be to do with you know, the impacting those apprentices who were already on programme and how their programme has been disrupted.
I don't know if you want to add to that, Annette.
Yeah, I think, you know, I agree with that. I think it's affected, obviously, as we've seen, different businesses in different ways. And we've been relatively fortunate in terms of digital apprenticeships because they, you know, by their nature, employers have been able to continue delivering the training, and also we've been able to continue with the assessment. So, you know, as Simon said, it's an uncertain time for organisations. And we've seen employers deciding to put back their cohorts, and it doesn't mean that they're not going to come through, but they had to delay them. So, you know, I definitely think these incentives are timely as well, because they're going to be coming at the right point to actually help those as they are able to start their apprentices again, or apprenticeship programs again.
Absolutely. Okay, to Robin, who asked, is the enhanced apprenticeship incentive only available for new starts from April the 1st? And what would you guess until then?
So there's a scheme that's running at the moment. So there's until the end of March, if you recruit a 16 to 24-year-old, there's a £2,000 incentive, and for a new hire apprentice who's over 25, there's a £1,500 incentive. So that scheme concludes at the end of March, and the new scheme starts from the 1st of April. I think there's a little bit of lack of clarity at the moment from the government, which they need to iron out. Because obviously within some of the technicalities of the rules, there's a difference between when an individual might start their employment and when they might start their apprenticeship. So I think the current rules say that you need to start your apprenticeship before the end of March, and the new scheme doesn't. So there's potentially a bit of crossover where someone might be employed in March and start their apprenticeship in April, where they could fall between the cracks. But I know the SFA are looking at that, but hopefully we'll get a bit of clarity on that this week. Okay,
thank you. I hope that answers that for you, Robin. Manny's got a question about traineeships, and also Manny, yes, we will be sharing the slides and the recording with all attendees afterwards. But the question about traineeships is, can you hire a trainee directly as an employer, or do we have to go through a traineeship provider?
So you have to go through a traineeship provider. The traineeship provider will access the funding to deliver the programme. The employer themselves obviously can offer the work placement aspect and draw down the incentive payment. I think there are some employers who pitch to become traineeship providers in their own right, but very few of them. So you'd have to go through a traineeship provider. I think if you go on to find an apprenticeship, I think there might be some information on there about who the traineeship providers are.
Okay, thank you. Julia, about ECTL level 1. So your question is about whether the level 1 quals will remain available and funded or being replaced by EDSQ. The funding has moved from entry level and level 1 IT users. Those qualifications will not be getting funding from August. But obviously the entitlement has now moved over to EDSQ that sits at those levels. From BCS, our level 1 qualifications will remain available as commercial products for the time being. But yes, I'm afraid the funding is going somewhere. Another one I think I can pick up, will BCS be offering automated testing for the mandatory improving productivity level 3 unit? Yes, we will. That will be available hopefully by the end of the month. That's the end of April. So that's the plan, but absolutely that is our plan. We're aware that that's a gap and we're filling that now. Mark. Tim, has IFATE produced the funding bands as seems to be its way for the refreshed standards?
Should I take that one?
Yeah.
I actually checked literally before I was about to speak, just in case they had, but they haven't as yet. They were expected earlier than this. We were sort of thinking that the new funding bands for the new, as soon as those funding bands are announced, then the new products will go, the new apprenticeships will go live. But they were expected around end of January. That hasn't happened. And what has to happen before those new apprenticeships can go live is that the skills minister needs to sign off to say that she's happy with the funding bands. So as soon as that's done, they will be available. They will go onto the IFATE website, and at the moment, what we don't definitely know, but we think is going to happen, is that there will be a period, a transition period, where the apprenticeships will go live and everyone will see that they're available, but the first starts won't be for some weeks after. At the moment, it's said that that's going to be 8 weeks. However, because they didn't go live in January, and it is now heading towards the end of March rapidly, it might not be the case that there are 8 weeks to have that transition period. So the answer is, we're waiting to see. As soon as BCS knows what's happening, and we are watching minute by minute to see when these come out, we will certainly be announcing that. What's very useful on the IFATE website now, they do have a tracker to see or show where standards are in the development or redevelopment stage. So if you go on to developing standards on the website, you can have a look there and keep an eye out yourself. But I think you will certainly hear it from organisations like BCS and others soon as they do become available.
Thank you very much. Penny, your question about ECDL Extra and the funding, longer term plans for funding that. That's our level 2, one of our level 2 qualifications. So you'll know that the call for evidence closed back in, towards the end of February, and we're waiting on outcomes and next steps from that. You ask, are we still committed to that qualification? BCS are very much committed to our level 2 qualifications. We feel they do have a very significant place, and we will be continuing to provide them and maintain them for as long as the funding follows. So we're waiting, sitting tight and waiting to hear the outcome of that and the next stage of the consultation. But they're certainly still available for the time being.
Time for one more question, Zoe, before we finish?
Yes, we have. I think it's. Have you got one? Sorry, Annette. Is that?
No, you go. I've got a couple, but you go ahead and ask. I think we've got time for at least one more of any in the chat.
I think there's just one more actually from Sheila about EDSQ. If a learner completes EDSQ entry 3 and is funded, can they move it to the level 1 and be funded? So Sheila, is your question, can they do both entry level and level 1? I believe they can, Simon. Is there?
I think the entitlement's up to level 1. So if their starting point is entry 3, they can do entry 3 and then level 1.
Yeah, that's, as we understand it, Sheila, they could, if they're going in at the entry level, they can do that and then progress and do both under the entitlement. And that, perfect timing, Annette, I'm going to hand over to you to summarise, but that's all of the questions in the chat for now. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Zoe. We've got 2 minutes, so I'm going to quickly ask you, Simon. You mentioned earlier on about the under 24s, and you know, we're not seeing those numbers on apprenticeships. What impact do you think the incentives and everything the government's doing at the moment is going to make on that?
I mean, it would have been nicer if the incentives had been more targeted to under 24s. So I mean, it's about creating jobs, isn't it? But I still think there's more levers that are required to stimulate and incentivize the under 24s outside of the sort of COVID support package, I guess. You know, whether that's you know, full funding rather than having an employer contribution. So I still think I think it'll make a difference, but I don't think it'll make enough of a difference, which we probably all think is needed.
So some more work to do there, and we all have to be involved, but some real opportunities. And I've got to say, Simon, thank you so much. That was super, super helpful, because there's so much information out there, and getting it into one slide deck like you have and putting it across in the way you have today has been absolutely fabulous. So thank you to you and AELP. Thank you, Zoe, as well, for your contribution. It's been really great to have everybody on this webinar today. We'll send out the slides and the recording. We'll also send out the links, obviously, that are in the deck, but other bits that we've mentioned today, like the employer guide on apprenticeships. And if there's any questions in there we haven't quite got to, Simon, we're going to ask you to fill in bits, and we will send out a summary of all of the questions. So thank you very much. Please do join us again for more BCS webinars. They're all on our website under our events page, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Simon.